Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about insecurity. So sources of what makes someone insecure and some strategies for how to become more secure. I'm Casey Lepper. I'm a licensed psychotherapist working with couples, families, and individuals, as well as a spiritual guide and teacher. Just a reminder, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. So let's talk about insecurity. I think it's a really important topic because most of us might lead with a feeling of confidence outwardly, but internally we're insecure. And others feel like they can't really be their true selves and show up in the world and express themselves because of their insecurity. And so I wanted to go into some sources of insecurity, where it comes from, and then how to get through it. As always, my content blends together contemporary psychological research with spiritual traditions, because in my experience, it really allowed me to reach a higher level of potential when I was able to use some of these ancient wisdom teachings along with what I knew about the mind and about how we are in relationships. So let's jump in. The first source of insecurity tends to be childhood. So a lot of us go through experiences early on, and when they happen early enough, they become a seed or a seed that sprouts weeds later on in life. And so this can be particularly harsh and harmful when it comes from our primary caregivers. If we didn't really receive the acceptance, the unconditional love, if we didn't feel understood or accepted or acknowledged, then this usually creates issues later down. And the idea being, if we felt like our primary caregivers did not accept us, then early on, we don't really have the cognitive abilities and the perspective and understanding that it was because of them. Instead, we have the belief that there's something inherently wrong with us. And that's why attachment styles can be so revolutionary to people when you figure out what type of style you have. And when you just acknowledge, what were the main messages I got from my parents early on? What about the adults that were around me or my teachers? And so you might have someone tell you something early on, and because you're a child and you have a really concrete way of looking at things, you think it's completely true. And it's amazing if what you're being told is that you're wonderful and you're full of potential and imagination and creativity. But if you were told you were fat, that you weren't smart, that you had too many emotions, that you were too much, that likely created a psychic and psychological wound early on. And so this can create a lot of problems down the road because we're holding that belief about ourselves. And then we tend to find it in a lot of our other relationships. So if we had a mom tell us we were too much, and then we start dating and we show up emotionally and then we're broken up with, then we just might file that under this belief that I've always been too much. I'm too much. And so a sense of insecurity is going to come through because there's an aspect of yourself that you aren't accepting. Now, when it comes to things we know we need to change about ourselves, when you have a healthy level of confidence, self-worth, and security, we can look at it more objectively. It doesn't feel like we're lacking in something. So if you say, I know I could be better at this, or I need to work on my control issues, or I need to be more calm in high stress situations, and you have that confidence and underlying security, it's going to be a lot easier to work through it. Rather than when you have some of these seeds that have turned into weeds, it can feel really, really confusing. And you're identifying yourself with a lesser version of you because you aren't accepting yourself. So rather living life from your highest self, knowing that you have everything within you to develop and grow and evolve, you might be attached to this lower aspect of yourself. So a belief that you're not good enough, that you're not worthy, that you're not lovable, that's going to cause issues in every area of life. Relationships, your self-development, your work, how you show up in the world. And so if you feel like childhood is where it's resonating with you, then doing some inner child healing. You can look at my channel where I talk about inner child healing more deeply. You can think about some of those early messages you got from your parents, and you can really work to understand what was the source of this wounding. The thing is, when we've heard things about ourselves early on and it's diminished our full potential, we can always go back, understand that experience in a new light, from a new perspective, and then we can start to heal it. Ultimately, for me, overcoming some of those early beliefs involved a level of psychological discovering, so understanding what those beliefs were, all while healing some of the subconscious wounds and being able to connect with my true, authentic self. So again, if you look at my channel, I have a video about your true self and your higher self and a meditation for you to get connected to that source. Because for me personally, it was really hard for me to drop some of those early beliefs about not feeling lovable and not feeling good enough until I was anchored to the greatest version of myself. And so that's what helped me. So the second reason why a lot of us have insecurity is because we have very negative self-talk and we're over-identified with our ego. So negative self-talk is the inner dialogue that you have about yourself or others tends to be slightly negative. What that might look like specifically is if you're working on a project and you've messed up and your boss emails you and says, hey, there needs to be this correction, you messed up here. If you're insecure, that's going to feel like a complete attack. Like your heart might hurt from it because you are already hard and cruel on yourself. And so if you already have this inner dialogue that's quite negative, if anyone on the outside says something to slightly confirm some of the thoughts that you've been telling yourself, it's going to feel really, really uncomfortable. And I think the positive thing about realizing this is when you are talking negatively about yourself, you're creating this energy where it's like a fragility and a vulnerability. And one of my biggest lessons is when someone did something to me and really, really hurt me. And because I was already so sensitive because I had really negative inner talk, when she hurt me, even though the situation, if I look back, wasn't so intense, it was a teacher for me. And so the people who have really negative self-talk, I feel like they tend to reach out to therapists or coaches earlier on because they're already getting so much negativity from themselves. And then if an outside situation occurs that really prompts a lot of pain, they're more likely to ask for help. Where a lot of this negative self-talk comes from is being over-identified with our ego. So our ego is our lower nature, our lower self, and is basically the reason why we have all our problems in life. And when we're over-identified with the ego, it's like that devil on the shoulder that we're listening to. It shifts our perspective, it stops our progression, and it really confuses us. And so doing some ego work, understanding the narrative of your ego, being able to write down and personify what your ego looks like, which is going to be that villain of your life. They're going to be the ones that the ego is the one that is telling you everything you can't do, why you shouldn't evolve, why you shouldn't take a leap of faith. It's the source of failure, of perfectionism, of self-sabotage, of pretty much all the negative patterns and beliefs that we have. So being able to understand the narrative of your ego can be really helpful to be able to have better self-talk, to be able to quiet that voice so you can lean into that authentic self and you can connect to that highest version. And that's really where that true healing comes from. A third reason why a lot of us have insecurity is because we're so attached to social comparison. Early on, most of us who are raised in the West have this preoccupation with competition and admiration. Because of how the school system's set up, where we get praise if we have hundreds or if we're the best at something, that's when we get attention. It's created this tendency towards kids feeling really competitive with each other. And as a result, we only feel really good enough when we're doing something that's externally admired. which creates a whole host of issues. And so we're likely to compare ourselves to the success of someone else, not realizing that just because someone is successful outwardly doesn't mean they don't have the negative self-talk, doesn't mean that they don't have early psychological wounding. It doesn't mean that they're a complete mess on the inside. And so when we're focused on the external validation, we're missing really the key, which is the inner work, where we like ourselves, where we feel really connected to what we're doing. And so a lot of people come to me who've been in corporate America for a long time, and maybe they make a ton of money. They have really great job status, really great benefits, but they're all unhappy. They're all stressed. They don't feel freedom. And it's because they've prioritized the outward rewards versus the inner. And so if this feels like you and you often compare yourself and you're always reaching for the next level and it's not enough, then it means that you have to really connect to what makes you feel good, what brings you joy, what within the world is trying to express itself through you. You have to start asking those deeper questions. I was listening to a podcast the other day with a really kind of famous, notable coach, and she said she had a client who sold his company and in one day got $400 million. And he texted her that night of the party and said, "Why isn't this enough?" And I think that is such a clear example of sometimes we think it's the money or the status or the admiration or the fame that's going to allow us to feel better for ourselves, but it's really an inside job. So if you compare, if you're always reaching for the next thing, if you're always trying to achieve, you have to check yourself and you have to ask, what is going to make me feel good within my own soul? What is it that I'm here to do? What is it here that I want to do in the world? What's going to make me feel fulfilled and have meaning? Meaning tends to be one of the aspects that allows us to do that inner work, because we can say what's meaningful on the external level, but our heart's not really going to lie. And the things that are meaningful are going to satisfy us on all levels. And if we're living a life that feels meaningful and really true to our virtues and our value system, then we're going to feel good about ourselves. We're going to feel that inner harmony because we're doing the thing we're supposed to be doing. The fourth and final reason why a lot of us are insecure is because we don't open ourselves to vulnerability. Shame and insecurity are very much bound to each other. So whether it's chasing success, focus on external validation, whether it's trauma or psychological wounding in childhood or adulthood, maybe it's the negative self-talk that you hold for yourself and it's that over-identification with ego. In any case, the more we hide from it, the more it grows. It's like that monster that's in the dark. And as soon as you turn on the lights, you realize it wasn't there or it wasn't as big of a problem as you thought. And so I think this is the magic of therapy or working with a mentor who you really trust. The second you're able to just verbalize what you're vulnerable around, where you feel shame, that shame goes away. Shame grows when it's hidden and when it's secretive. And whenever you get courageous enough to share the shame, to share what it is that you've been telling yourself, to share that maybe you feel empty even though you make a ton of money, or that you have this fear that you're not lovable or good enough. And when you've put it and you send it and you talk to a person who can hold that, that's going to be so very healing. Again, shame grows in secrecy. And so the second you release it and you say it out loud, either you feel emotionally held, empathized with, acknowledged, or what generally happens is there's someone on the other end who will tell you that they're going through it, that they have gone through it, that they've gotten through it. And so if you're suffering with any of these things, it's really helpful to have an outside source give you perspective. Almost everyone I know is insecure in some way or another. And maybe they lean towards their strengths, but that doesn't mean they have an opening in their armor. And then once it's pressed, because the universe likes to press on it so we can grow, we need to be able to speak to someone or let it out. So it's not just something that we're shifting our whole life to avoid. Any insecurity or shame that we have within will eventually be shown. And it's the people who decide to have courage to face the pain, to embrace it, and to overcome it are the ones that become the heroes. And the people who don't are the ones that hide, the ones that numb, the ones that avoid, or maybe the ones that continue to spread pain onto others because they haven't dealt with that thing. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you guys next time.